Hey, you know those moments when someone thinks they've got you all figured out, and then boom, the tables turn so fast they don't even see it coming? That's exactly what's about to happen here, and trust me, you're going to love every bit of it. Kindly give me a thumbs up and subscription if you love stories where the underdog becomes the one everyone should have feared from the start. Now, let's dive in. Harlow sashayed between tables with practiced ease, balancing 3 plates on one arm while mentally calculating tips that would barely cover her tuition payment due next week. She'd worked at Pearl Garden for 2 years now, long enough to read customers before they even open their mouths. But tonight felt totally different. The group that walked in at exactly 8:30 carried themselves like they owned not just the restaurant, but the entire block. 6 men in luxurious dark clothing, moving in tight formation around one central figure. He couldn't have been older than 35, hair slicked back, a scar running thin and pale along his jawline. His eyes swept the room once, cold, assessing, before he nodded toward the private booth in the back corner. Harlow's coworker, Jenny, gripped her elbow. "Don't take that table," she whispered, face suddenly pale. "I heard my cousin talking about men like that. They're dangerous." "I need the money," Harlow muttered while she served. She approached with her notepad ready, professional smile in place. The men had arranged themselves strategically, 2 facing the entrance, 2 watching the kitchen, the others bracketing their boss. Military precision disguised as a casual dinner. "Welcome to Pearl Garden," Harlow began. "Can I start you gentlemen with?" The central figure cut her off with a lazy wave, then turned to his companions and spoke in rapid Korean. His tone was dismissive, almost mocking, but Harlow kept her expression neutral. She'd learned long ago that the best weapon was letting people underestimate you. He continued talking, his voice dropping into what sounded like regional slang, rougher than the polite Korean she'd heard from her classmate. The men around him chuckled, low, ugly sounds that made her skin prickle. One of them glanced at her and said something that made the others laugh harder. The boss leaned back, fingers drumming against the table. "이 흑인 계집애는 우리가 뭐라고 하는지 하나도 모르겠지. 불쌍하게. 저런 게 우리 밥이나 제대로 날라올까." He smirked. "Maybe we should just take her instead of tipping. Or burn this place down for the insurance money. This neighborhood needs better businesses anyway." Harlow's hand moved so fast none of them saw it coming. A fly had been buzzing near the table. She snatched it from the air mid-flight, held it for exactly 2 seconds, then released it unharmed. The movement was precise, controlled, deadly in its efficiency. Every man at the table went still. She set down 6 water glasses without a tremor, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Table 4 is for paying customers. Trash belongs in the alley. If you speak again like you own what you don't, I'll treat you exactly like the trash you're pretending not to be." The words came out in perfect Korean, not textbook perfect, but street perfect, the kind learned in back alleys and underground fighting rings. "Now, do you want to order, or should I call someone who actually has authority here?" The boss's face went through several expressions, shock, then calculation, then something that might have been respect or might have been rage. Hard to tell. His right-hand man reached inside his jacket, but the boss held up one finger, stopping him cold. "You speak our language," he said slowly, switching to English now. "I speak 7 languages," Harlow replied. "Korean just happens to be the one your mother taught me when I trained under her in Itaewon 3 years ago. Madame Gu sends her regards, by the way. She's disappointed you're using her lessons to insult service workers instead of building the empire she wanted for you." The temperature in the booth dropped 20 degrees. "You're lying," one of the men spat. Harlow pulled out her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and held up a photo. An older Korean woman with steel-gray hair and eyes like flint stood next to a younger Harlow, both of them in training gear, both sporting fresh bruises. The timestamp read 3 years ago, location tagged to a gym in Seoul that didn't advertise and didn't take walk-ins. "She taught me Kumdo and Taekwondo for 8 months, Harlow continued. "Said I had potential. Said I reminded her of someone stubborn who never listened to wisdom until it was too late." She looked directly at the boss. "Pretty sure she meant you, sure who?" That name, his real name, not the American alias he used, made him flinch. Actually flinch. "How do you?" Your mother talks about you constantly. How you were supposed to be a prosecutor. How you chose a different path. How she still lights candles every Sunday hoping you'll come home. Harlow's voice softened just slightly. She showed me pictures. You were 12 in most of them. Smiling. Sherhu's jaw worked silently. His men looked at each other, uncertain now. The power dynamic had shifted so completely, it left everyone reeling. What's your name? He finally asked. Harlow. Harlow what? Just Harlow. That's all you get tonight. He studied her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and gave her a slight bow, not mocking, but genuine. We'll leave. This was inappropriate. You'll stay, Harlow corrected, pulling out her notepad again. You'll order food. You'll eat it. You'll tip 20% like civilized humans. And then you'll leave without causing problems for my manager, who's a single father working 3 jobs to keep this place running. She met his eyes dead on. Your mother didn't raise you to waste food or disrespect honest work. Don't disappoint her twice in one night. The silence stretched so long Harlow could hear the kitchen staff arguing about marinade ratios. Then Sherhu laughed. Actually laughed. Sharp and surprised and almost genuine. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both, Harlow said. The bulgogi's good here. So's the kimchi jjigae. I recommend both. He ordered both. So did his men, following his lead like synchronized dancers. Harlow wrote it down, turned on her heel, and walked back to the kitchen with her pulse finally starting to race. She'd just confronted a man who could probably make her disappear with a phone call, and she'd done it by invoking his mother's name like a protective charm. Jenny grabbed her the second she pushed through the kitchen doors. What happened? Are you okay? They looked ready to. They're ordering dinner, Harlow said, voice steady despite her shaking hands. Double portions. It's fine. It wasn't fine. She knew it wasn't fine. But she couldn't afford to show weakness now, not when she'd just drawn a line in the sand using nothing but memory and nerve. The food came up fast. Harlow delivered it personally, setting plates down with the same efficiency she'd shown catching that fly. Sherhu watched her every movement, cataloging details probably, looking for weaknesses. But she gave him nothing except perfect service. Halfway through the meal, he spoke again. My mother really taught you? For 8 months. She said I had good instincts, but terrible follow-through. Said I gave up too easily when things got hard. Harlow refilled his water. She was right. Why were you in Seoul? Study abroad program. Art history major. She didn't mention the part where she'd been running from a bad relationship, or how Madame Gu had found her crying in a park at 2 in the morning and offered her a different kind of education. Some stories weren't for sharing with strangers, even dangerous ones who knew your teacher. Sherhu nodded slowly. She never mentioned you. I asked her not to. Privacy thing. Harlow paused. She made me promise to check on you if I ever ended up stateside. Said you were in New York running business ventures and needed someone to remind you where you came from. This is that reminder? This is me doing my job. The reminder would have been much worse. He actually smiled at that. Small, barely there, but real. His men noticed. The tension eased fractionally, enough that the table next to theirs stopped pretending not to eavesdrop. They finished eating. Sherhu left 40% tip, not 20, and a business card with just a phone number embossed in silver. Call me, he said. My mother would want us to talk properly. Not here. Maybe, Harlow replied, pocketing the card without looking at it. You're not afraid of me. I'm terrified of you, she corrected. I'm just better at hiding it than most people. That seemed to satisfy him. He left with his men, the group of them melting into the night like shadows returning to darkness. Harlow watched them go, then immediately went to the bathroom and threw up from the adrenaline crash. Jenny found her there 10 minutes later. You're insane. You know that. Probably, Harlow admitted, rinsing her mouth. But rent's due Friday, and I need this job. She didn't call the number. Not that night, not the next day, not even when curiosity started eating at her like acid. Sherhu had walked into her life and then walked out, and that should have been the end of it.
Clean break. No complications.
except his mother called her 3 days later. Harloya, Madame Gu's voice crackled through the international connection. My son tells me you're in New York. Yes, ma'am. He says you're working as a waitress. Yes, ma'am. A long pause, weighted with disappointment. I taught you better than that. I'm also finishing my degree, Harlow said defensively. Art history. I'm writing my thesis on. You're wasting your training. The skills I gave you, they're not for carrying plates. They're my skills now. I use them how I want. Another pause, this one approving. Good. You learned that lesson at least. But Harloya, listen. My son, he's complicated. But he's not bad. Not in his center. You understand. I'm not sure I do, ma'am. He needs someone who sees him. Really sees him. Not the reputation. Not the fear, not the money. Just him. Madame Gu's voice softened. You did that when you spoke to him. You saw the boy I raised instead of the man he became. That's rare. That's valuable. I'm not interested in. I'm not asking you to be interested. I'm asking you to answer when he calls. Give him 1 hour. For me. Harlow closed her eyes. Madame Gu had saved her life and soul, literally and figuratively. Had taught her how to defend herself, how to stand tall, how to stop running from hard things. This was a debt, and debts had to be paid. 1 hour, she agreed. Thank you, daughter. The call ended. Harlow stared at her phone, at the business card she'd tucked into her case, at the choice she'd just made, without really choosing. Then she dialed the number before she could talk herself out of it. Sherhu answered on the first ring. Took you long enough. Your mother's persuasive. She's a force of nature, he agreed. Dinner tomorrow? Somewhere public, your choice. Not a restaurant. I spend enough time in restaurants. Name it. The Art Museum. Main branch. 2 p.m. She could lose herself in crowds there, could run if needed, could scream and be heard. Plus, it was her territory. She knew every gallery, every exit, every security guard by name. I'll be there, Sherhu said and hung up. Harlow spent the next 24 hours second-guessing everything. What did you wear to meet a mobster at a museum? What did you even talk about? Art? Crime? The weather? She settled on jeans and a leather jacket, comfortable boots she could run in, her phone fully charged, and her best friend's number on speed dial. Sherhu showed up wearing almost the same thing, jeans, jacket, looking less like a crime boss and more like a grad student running late for class. He'd come alone, no bodyguards, no weapons visible. That probably meant the weapons were hidden, but still. Small mercies. You like art? He asked by way of greeting. I'm writing my thesis on the intersection of traditional African and Asian artistic motifs in contemporary urban spaces, Harlow replied. So yes, I like art. They started walking, letting the museum swallow them into its quiet spaces. Harlow led them toward the modern wing, where installations hung from ceilings and sculptures jutted from walls in defiance of gravity. My mother wanted me to be a lawyer, Sherhu said suddenly. Prosecutor specifically. She had my whole life planned, Seoul University, passing the bar, making her proud. What happened? My father happened. He ran a small import business, completely legitimate, until he got in debt to the wrong people. They came to collect when I was 15. Beat him so badly, he never walked right again. Sherhu's voice went flat. The police did nothing. The prosecutors did nothing. The system my mother believed in completely failed us. Harlow didn't respond, just let him talk. So, I joined the people who had power. Real power. Started small, running messages, doing pickups. Worked my way up. By the time I was 25, I was running my own crew. By 30, I controlled 3 territories. He stopped in front of a painting, abstract swirls of red and black, violent and beautiful. My mother found out 2 years ago. She was visiting from Seoul, and someone tried to kill me at a restaurant. She saw everything. That's when she stopped talking to you? That's when she started calling every single day, begging me to come home, to leave this life, to be the son she raised. Sherhu's reflection stared back from the glass protecting the painting. I can't. I'm in too deep. But I also can't cut her off completely because she's my mother and I love her, and I'm still somewhere under all this, the boy she raised. So you're stuck, Harlow said quietly. So I'm stuck, he agreed. They moved to the next gallery. Harlow pointed out a sculpture she'd studied last semester. Interlocking pieces of metal and wood from 6 different cultures, all balanced in impossible harmony. That's beautiful, Shirhu said, and sounded like he meant it. It's about finding connection in chaos. The artist said each piece represents a different refugee story, but together they create something stable, something that holds. Harlow tilted her head. I think about that a lot. How broken things can still build something whole. Shirhu looked at her instead of the art. My mother chose well. Chose well for what? She sent you to remind me I'm still human, that I can still appreciate beautiful things, that I'm not completely lost. He smiled, sad and small. She's always been smarter than me. They spent 3 hours in that museum, talking about art, about soul, about Madame Gu's teaching methods that bordered on torture. Shirhu told stories about growing up between 2 cultures, never quite fitting in either. Harlow shared about being a black woman in South Korea, the stares and assumptions and small kindnesses that caught her off guard. It wasn't a date. It wasn't romance. It was 2 people circling each other, trying to figure out if they could be friends despite everything that said they shouldn't. At the end, Shirhu walked her to the subway station. Can I see you again? Why? Because talking to you is the first time in years I felt like myself instead of the person everyone expects me to be. He shoved his hands in his pockets. That's worth something. Harlow considered. Once a week. Public places. No business talk. And if anyone threatens me because of you, I'm gone. Fair terms, Shirhu agreed. They shook on it like business partners, and maybe that's what they were. An arrangement. A reminder service. Madame Gu's long-distance attempt to save her son's soul, one museum visit at a time. But 3 weeks later, something shifted. They were at a park, watching people play soccer, when Shirhu's phone rang. He glanced at it, face going hard. I need to take this. Go ahead. He walked 10 feet away, voice dropping low and urgent. Harlow couldn't hear the words, but she could read his body language, tension in his shoulders, his free hand clenching and unclenching. When he came back, he looked 10 years older. Problem, she asked. Someone's moving into my territory. Starting fights, disrupting business. I need to handle it before it escalates. Handle it how? Shirhu met her eyes. You don't want to know. You're right. I don't. Harlow stood up, brushing grass from her jeans. This is where I get off, then. I can't be involved in. I'm not asking you to be involved. I'm just telling you why I need to cancel next week's meeting. He stood too, keeping distance between them. Whatever you think of me, whatever I do in my other life, it stays separate from this. From you. That's not how it works, and you know it. Then tell me how to make it work, Shirhu said, frustrated now. Tell me how to be the person my mother wants while still surviving in the world I chose. Because I don't know. I'm trying, but I don't know. Harlow wanted to walk away. Should have walked away. But Madame Gu's voice echoed in her head. He's not bad in his center. And she made a choice that would change everything. Handle your business, she said finally. But don't lie to me about it. Don't pretend you're something you're not. If we're doing this, whatever this is, then it has to be honest. Honest, Shirhu repeated, tasting the word. You want me to tell you when I'm going to do something illegal? I want you to tell me when you're going to be gone. When you're in danger. When I should worry. She crossed her arms. I'm not asking for details. Just truth. He thought about that for a long moment, then nodded. I can do truth. Good. Now go. And Shirhu. She caught his arm as he turned. Don't get killed. Your mother would never forgive me. That surprised a laugh out of him. Rough and genuine. I'll do my best. He left. Harlow went home, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling wondering what she'd just signed up for. A friendship with a crime boss. Weekly meetings with someone who probably had blood on his hands. All because an old woman in Seoul believed her son deserved saving. The next week, Shirhu showed up with a black eye and split knuckles. It's handled, was all he said. They went to a bookstore instead of the museum, browsing in comfortable silence. Sherhu gravitated toward philosophy and history. Harlow stuck to her art books and the occasional fantasy novel. They ended up in the coffee shop attached to the store, comparing purchases over expensive lattes. Nietzsche, Harlow said, eyebrow raised. Really? He writes about power. Seemed relevant. He also writes about becoming monsters when you fight them too long. Sherhu's smile was bitter.
Yeah.
I caught that part. 2 months passed like this. Weekly meetings, careful conversations, a friendship building in the spaces between his criminal life and her normal one. Harlow learned that Sherhu loved classical music, hated seafood, could quote poetry in 3 languages. Sherhu learned that Harlow painted in her spare time, had a younger brother she supported through college, dreamed of opening her own gallery someday. They didn't talk about feelings. Didn't acknowledge the way Sherhu started smiling more easily around her, or how Harlow caught herself checking her phone for his messages. This was just companionship. 2 lonely people finding connection in an unlikely place. Then Harlow's ex showed up. She was leaving Pearl Garden after a closing shift when someone grabbed her arm in the parking lot. Harlow, we need to talk. Marcus, 6 feet tall, charming when he wanted to be, dangerous when he didn't get his way. The reason she'd fled to Seoul in the first place, the reason she still looked over her shoulder sometimes. Let go, Harlow said, voice steady. Not until you listen. I've changed. I'm in therapy. I want another chance. I said let go. His grip tightened. You always were stubborn. That's what I loved about you. That fire. He pulled her closer. Come on, baby. Just coffee. Just talk. Harlow's training kicked in. She twisted her arm in the specific way Madame Gu had taught her, breaking his hold and creating distance in one smooth motion. Touch me again, and I'll break your wrist. We're done. We've been done for 3 years. Move on. Marcus's face darkened. You think you're too good for me now? You think working some cheap restaurant and playing artist makes you better? I think you need to leave. Or what? You gonna call the cops? We both know you won't. You never do. He stepped forward, and Harlow's hand went to the pepper spray in her pocket. A car pulled up behind them, sleek, black, expensive. The door opened and Sherhu got out, flanked by 2 of his men. Problem? Sherhu asked, voice pleasant and absolutely terrifying. Marcus looked between them, calculating. Who's this? Your new boyfriend. I'm a friend, Sherhu said. And friends don't let friends get harassed in parking lots. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Harlow. Then you're going to leave. Then you're going to forget she exists. And if I don't? Sherhu smiled. No warmth in it, just edges. Then my friends and I will help you remember why it's important to respect women when they say no. We're very good at helping people remember things. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Marcus took one look at Sherhu's face, at the men behind him, and whatever he saw there made him take 3 steps back. This isn't over, he muttered to Harlow. Yes, Sherhu said quietly. It is. Marcus left, practically ran to his car. Harlow watched him go, then turned to Sherhu with a dozen questions fighting for space. How did you know I was here? I have someone watching the restaurant, making sure you get home safe. Sherhu shrugged like this was completely normal. You work late shifts in a bad neighborhood. I worry. You have someone watching me, Harlow repeated, unsure if she should be grateful or furious. Just a night. Just to the subway. I'm not monitoring your life. I'm making sure you have one. He paused. Is that too much? I can stop if it's too much. Harlow thought about Marcus's grip on her arm, about the fear she'd felt before Sherhu showed up, about the relief flooding through her now. It's a lot. But thank you. For tonight. For being here. Always, Sherhu said and meant it. They stood there in the parking lot, the October wind picking up around them, neither quite sure what to do next. Then Harlow laughed, slightly hysterical, mostly exhausted, and Sherhu's face softened. Coffee, he offered. Real coffee, not whatever terrible stuff Jenny makes in that kitchen. Coffee sounds perfect. They ended up at an all-night diner 6 blocks away, sitting in a booth that had probably been old when Harlow was born. She ordered pancakes at midnight because why not, and Sherhu got black coffee and pie, and they talked about everything except what had just happened. But it sat between them anyway. The fact that he'd come when she needed him. The fact that she was glad he had. Marcus is my ex, Harlow said finally. From college. He got controlling. Possessive. It got bad enough that I left the country to get away from him. Does he do this often? Show up. Every few months. He finds me somehow, tries again. I move apartments, change my routine, but he always figures it out. She pushed her pancakes around her plate. I've reported him twice. Both times, nothing happened. Not enough evidence. Not a credible threat. You know how it goes. Sherhu's jaw tightened. Want me to make him disappear? Sherhu.
I'm joking.
Mostly. He took a breath. But I can make sure he doesn't come back. Legally. Restraining orders that actually work. Lawyers who don't quit when he shows up with excuses. I have resources. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Because you're my friend and friends help each other. Sherhu met her eyes. Let me do this. Please. Harlow wanted to say no. Wanted to handle this herself. Prove she didn't need anyone. But she was tired, so tired of looking over her shoulder, of changing her number, of being afraid. And Sherhu was offering not violence but actual help, the legal kind, the kind she'd never been able to afford. Okay, she said. Thank you. You keep thanking me. Stop that. Make me. He grinned. Actually grinned, and it transformed his whole face from dangerous crime boss to the boy Madame Gu had raised. Eat your pancakes. You're getting syrup everywhere. 3 days later, Marcus received a restraining order backed by enough legal pressure to make him think twice. A week after that, he left the state entirely. Harlow didn't ask questions about how Sherhu had managed it. Some gifts you just accepted. But it changed things between them. Made their friendship feel less theoretical and more real. Sherhu had proven he'd protect her not with violence, but with the very system he'd once rejected. And Harlow had let herself be protected, had accepted help, had trusted him with something precious. The weeks blurred together. Fall turned to winter. They met twice a week now instead of once, grabbing lunch between her classes and his meetings, texting random thoughts throughout the day. Sherhu sent her photos of graffiti he thought she'd like. Harlow sent him museum exhibits worth visiting. It still wasn't romance. Neither of them crossed that line, though the line was getting harder to see. Then came the night everything broke. Harlow was studying in her apartment when her phone rang. Sherhu's number. She answered expecting his usual greeting, but instead heard chaos, shouting, car horns, him breathing hard. I need your address, he said without preamble. Right now. What's wrong? Someone's after me. Not just me, they're threatening anyone connected to me. I need to make sure you're somewhere safe. Harlow's blood went cold. I'm at home. Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone. I'm sending 2 of my men to get you. Their names are Vincent and Leo. Don't trust anyone else. Sherhu, what's happening? A rival crew. They're making moves, trying to force me out. It's going to get ugly before it gets better. His voice cracked.
I'm sorry.
I never wanted you involved in this. But they know we're friends. They know you matter to me. And they'll use that. Where are you? Getting somewhere safe. My men will take you there too. Just pack a bag and be ready. He hung up. Harlow stared at her phone, then at her apartment. This space she'd built, this life she'd made. And she had a choice. Run alone, or trust the crime boss who'd somehow become the person she trusted most. She packed a bag. Vincent and Leo showed up 20 minutes later, big men with kind faces. Ex-military by the way they moved. They checked her apartment, secured the hallway, then escorted her to a car like she was someone important instead of just a scared waitress. This safe house was actually a penthouse in Manhattan, all floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive furniture. Sherhu was there, pacing, phone pressed to his ear. He looked up when she walked in, and the relief on his face was almost painful to see. "You're okay," he said.
I'm okay.
"Are you?" "I've been better." He finished his call, then waved his men away. "Make sure the perimeter's secure. I want updates every hour." They left. Harlow set down her bag, taking in the space. "This is yours. One of several safe locations. I rotate between them." Sherhu ran a hand through his hair. "There's food in the kitchen, bedroom down the hall. You can stay as long as you need. As long as it takes to handle this." "Handle it how?"
I'm negotiating.
"Trying to avoid a war. But if negotiation fails..." He trailed off. "If negotiation fails, people get hurt." "Yes." Harlow sat down on the expensive couch, this whole situation feeling surreal. "Your mother would hate this." "My mother would tell me I made my choices, and now I'm living with them." Sherhu sat next to her, careful to keep distance. "She'd probably also tell me I'm an idiot for getting you involved." "You didn't get me involved. I chose to answer your calls.
Chose to meet you.
Chose to be your friend." Harlow turned to face him. "I knew who you were from the beginning. I don't get to play innocent now. You're not like me."
No.
"But I'm not completely different either. We're both trying to survive, just using different methods." They sat in silence for a while, the city glittering below them through those massive windows. Harlow thought about the path that had led her here. Seoul, Madame Gu, the restaurant, Sherhu walking in with his assumptions and his arrogance. How one moment had spiraled into this strange, complicated friendship that she couldn't imagine living without now. "When this is over," Sherhu said quietly, "I think I should stop seeing you." Harlow's stomach dropped. "What?" "For your safety. For your future. You deserve a normal life, not whatever this is." "Don't I get a say in that?" "You do. But I'm asking you to really think about it. About what being connected to me means. Tonight was just a preview. This could happen again. Worse. And I couldn't forgive myself if something happened to you because of me." Harlow wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he didn't get to make that choice for her, that she was capable of deciding her own risks. But fear edged his voice, real and raw, and she realized this wasn't about pushing her away. This was about him being terrified he'd get her killed. "Let's deal with tonight first," she said instead. "Tomorrow we can argue about the future." Relief flickered across his face.
Deal.
They ordered takeout Korean food from a place Sherhu trusted, the delivery guy someone on his payroll. They ate on the floor like college students, the expensive furniture ignored. Sherhu told her about growing up between cultures, never quite Korean enough in Seoul, never quite American enough in New York. Harlow shared about her family, her mother who worked double shifts as a nurse, her brother currently studying engineering, the expectations she'd carry that weighed heavier than any degree. "You paint though," Sherhu said. "I've seen your sketches. Why not pursue that?" "Because art doesn't pay bills. Because I promised my mom I'd get a real degree. Because I'm scared I'm not good enough to make it." Harlow shrugged. All the usual reasons people give up on dreams. "My mother used to say the only real failure is not trying." Your mother is terrifying and wise. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Harlow laughed, and Sherhu smiled, and for a moment they could pretend they were just two people having dinner instead of hiding from criminals in a safe house. But reality came crashing back at 3 in the morning when gunshots echoed from somewhere close, not inside the building, but near enough to send Sherhu's entire security team into high alert. He shoved Harlow into the bedroom, told her to stay down, then disappeared with his men to assess the threat. She sat on the floor with her back to the bed, phone clutched in shaking hands, and understood viscerally what being connected to Sherhu meant. This fear, this danger, this violence always lurking at the edges. 20 minutes later, he came back. False alarm. Different situation, different crew. But we're moving anyway. Too exposed here. They went to another safe house, this one in Queens, smaller, less glamorous, but reinforced like a bunker. Dawn was breaking by the time they settled in, both of them running on adrenaline and fear. "You should sleep," Sherhu said. "So should you. Someone needs to stay alert. That's what your security team is for." Harlow grabbed his hand, squeezed once.
Ai fine.
You're fine. We're safe. Now sleep.
He did, eventually.
Collapsed on the couch while Harlow took the bedroom, his men stationed at every entrance. She should have been terrified. Maybe she was. But underneath the fear was something else, a strange certainty that as long as Sherhu was there, she'd be okay. She woke to voices arguing in Korean. Sherhu and someone on speakerphone, rapid-fire conversation too fast for her to follow. Then silence. Then Sherhu appeared in the doorway. It's over, he said. We reached an agreement. Territory swap, money exchange, no bloodshed. You can go home. Harlow sat up. Just like that. Just like that. The rival crew got what they wanted, I kept what matters. Everyone walks away. He leaned against the doorframe. You were right to push me toward negotiation. Violence would have cost more than I could afford. When did I push you toward negotiation? You didn't have to say it. Being around you reminds me there are better ways to solve problems. Ways my mother would approve of. Sherhu managed a tired smile. You're a good influence. First time anyone said that about me. He arranged for Vincent to drive her home, insisted on having someone watch her building for the next week, just to be sure. At her apartment door, Harlow turned back. You were going to cut me off, she said. For my safety. Are you still planning to do that? Sherhu hesitated. I should. But will you? No, he admitted. I'm too selfish. And you make me remember who I wanted to be before everything went wrong. I need that. Even if I shouldn't. Good. Because I wasn't planning to let you ghost me anyway. Harlow punched his arm lightly. We're friends. Real friends. That means you don't get to make unilateral decisions about what's best for me. Noted. And Sherhu? Next time there's danger, you call me first. Not your men, not your lawyers.
Me.
Because friends worry about each other. Something shifted in his expression, gratitude and disbelief, and maybe something deeper. You're either very brave or very stupid.
I'm loyal, Harlow corrected.
There's a difference. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it got when your best friend ran criminal operations between coffee dates. Harlow finished her thesis. Sherhu successfully negotiated 3 more territorial disputes without violence. They celebrated both achievements with terrible Chinese takeout and worse movies. Madame Gu called monthly now, talking to both of them on speakerphone, dispensing wisdom and guilt in equal measures. She still wanted Sherhu to come home, but she'd stopped demanding it. Progress was progress, even when measured in millimeters. Spring arrived. Harlow defended her thesis successfully, graduated with honors. Sherhu showed up at her ceremony in a suit, flowers in hand, looking absolutely out of place among the academics and families. But he was there. That mattered. Your mother would be proud, he said, handing her the flowers. Yours too, Harlow replied. You should call her. Tell her about the peace you've been building. She wouldn't believe me. Try anyway.
He did.
That night, from Harlow's apartment, making the call while she pretended not to listen. His Korean was softer than she'd ever heard it, almost tentative. Madame Gu cried. So, did Sherhu, though he tried to hide it. When he hung up, Harlow didn't mention the tears. Just handed him tea and sat next to him in comfortable silence. She wants to visit, Sherhu said finally. This summer. Wants to see New York. Wants to meet you properly. I'd like that. Fair warning. She'll interrogate you about your intentions. She thinks we're dating. Harlow nearly spit out her tea. What did you tell her? The truth. That we're friends. Good friends. That you matter to me more than most people. He glanced over. She said that's how all good relationships start. With friendship and honesty. She's not wrong. Are we talking about hypothetical relationships, or? Sherhu. Harlow set down her tea. Do you want to date me? The question hung between them, dangerous and thrilling. Sherhu looked at her. Really looked, the way he had that first night in Pearl Garden when she'd surprised him with perfect Korean. I don't know if I should want to, he said carefully. My life is complicated. Dangerous. You deserve better. That's not what I ask. Yes, he admitted. I want to date you. have wanted to for months. But I kept telling myself it was selfish, that I'd ruin your life, that. Harlow leaned over and stopped his words with her hand over his mouth.
Here's what I know.
You make me laugh.
You challenge me.
You showed up at my graduation, even though you hate crowds. You negotiated peace deals instead of starting wars because I mentioned I preferred solutions to violence. You're trying to be better every single day, and that's more attractive than any romantic gesture could be. She pulled her hand away. So yes, I want to date you too, but we do it honestly. No hiding your work, no pretending you're someone you're not. I need to know the truth, even when it's ugly, even when it's criminal. I'm not asking for details. Just honesty about risk, about danger, about when I should worry.
Can you give me that?
Sherhu thought for a long moment, then nodded. I can give you that. Then we try together. Their first official date was at the same museum where they'd had their first meeting. Full circle, Harlow thought. They held hands this time, standing in front of that sculpture of interlocking pieces, broken things building something whole. I never thought I'd get this, Sherhu said quietly. Something normal. Something good. It's not normal, Harlow corrected. But maybe it's good anyway. They tried. Dating a crime boss turned out to be exactly as complicated as expected. Cancelled plans when emergencies arose, security details at restaurants, Harlow learning not to ask questions when Sherhu came home with split knuckles he wouldn't explain. But there were good parts too. Sherhu at her art shows, uncomfortable but present. Weekend trips upstate when things were calm. Late-night conversations about everything and nothing. Madame Gu visited in July. She took one look at them together and smiled, not surprised, just satisfied. I knew, she told Harlow in Korean. I knew you'd be good for him. He's good for me too, Harlow replied. Of course. That's how it works. The visit lasted 2 weeks. Madame Gu dragged Sherhu to museums, made Harlow demonstrate her kumdo forms, cooked enough Korean food to feed an army. On her last night, she gathered them both in Harlow's tiny apartment. My son is not perfect, she said. He's made bad choices. Will probably make more. But he's trying. You see that, yes? Yes, ma'am, Harlow agreed. And you're not afraid of him. You don't worship him or fear him. You just see him. That's rare. That's valuable. Madame Gu looked between them. You balance each other.
Keep doing that.
Keep being honest. Keep trying. We will, Sherhu promised. August brought trouble. A new crew moving into the territory, aggressive and unwilling to negotiate. Sherhu tried peace first, Harlow's influence evident in every attempted compromise. But some people only understood violence. He came home one night barely standing, blood on his shirt, face pale. Harlow helped him to the couch, started treating wounds with hands that shook despite years of training. It's going to get worse, Sherhu said. This crew, they want war. I can't avoid it anymore. Then we prepare.
We. He caught her hand. No.
You stay out of this. You stay safe. Not how this works. Remember the deal? Honest. Together. That includes the hard parts. Harlow. I'm not asking to be on the front lines. But I won't sit at home pretending you're not risking your life. We handle this as a team, or we don't handle it at all. Sherhu looked at her. This art history graduate who'd learned to fight in Seoul, who refused to be protected like fragile glass, who'd chosen him despite everything that said she shouldn't. Okay, he said. Together. They planned carefully. Sherhu reaching out to allies, building coalitions. Harlow using her research skills to find information on the rival crew, their patterns, their weaknesses. It wasn't a traditional partnership, but it worked. The confrontation came in September. Not the violent war Sherhu had feared, but a tense negotiation in neutral territory, both sides armed, both sides ready to fight, but both willing to talk first. Sherhu had learned that much at least. Harlow waited in the car with Vincent. She'd wanted to go in, but Sherhu had drawn that line firmly. Some risks weren't worth taking. She spent 2 hours listening to Vincent's stories about his kids, trying not to imagine bullets and blood and losing the person she'd somehow fallen in love with. When Sherhu emerged, he was smiling. actually smiling. We reached terms, he said, sliding into the car. Territory split, profit sharing, mutual non-aggression. No blatstjut. You did it, Harlow said. We did it. He pulled her close, careful of his still healing ribs. Your research gave me leverage I wouldn't have had. You made this possible. They went home, Sherhu's penthouse now because Harlow had basically moved in over the summer, her art supplies taking over his spare room. She made him shower, checked his bandages, made him promise to call his mother in the morning. She'll want to know you chose peace again, Harlow said. Only because you give me reasons to choose it, Sherhu replied. Fall blurred into winter. Harlow landed a position at a small gallery, starting as an assistant curator, but with room to grow. Sherhu's territories stayed peaceful, his reputation shifting from violent enforcer to shrewd negotiator. Not everyone was happy about the change, but respect was respect. They found rhythms together. Sunday brunches that were sacred, no business, no emergencies, just them. Thursday dinners at Pearl Garden where Jenny still looked at them like they'd lost their minds. Monthly calls to Madame Gu that lasted hours. Sherhu proposed on a Tuesday in March. Nothing elaborate, just them in her studio, surrounded by her latest paintings, him holding a simple silver band. I know this is complicated, he said. I know I'm not the safe choice or the smart choice. But you make me want to be better. Every single day. And I love you. Have loved you since you caught that fly and threatened me in Korean. Harlow laughed through tears. That's when you fell for me? That's when I knew you were dangerous. Took me a few more weeks to realize I was in trouble. He held out the ring. So, what do you say? Want to make this permanent? She said yes. Obviously yes. Because he was right, it was complicated and not safe and definitely not smart. But it was theirs. Built on honesty and friendship, and two broken people figuring out how to be whole together. Madame Gu cried when they told her. Happy tears this time, relieved tears.
Finally, she said.
My stubborn son finally listened to wisdom. Your stubborn son finally found someone worth listening to, Sherhu corrected. The wedding was small. Just close friends, family, a few of Sherhu's most trusted men. Jenny insisted on catering, which meant Pearl Garden's entire menu spread across tables in an art gallery Harlow had rented for the occasion. Madame Gu flew in 2 weeks early, brought half of Seoul with her in luggage, cried through the entire ceremony. They wrote their own vows. Sherhu promised honesty, even when it was hard. Promised to choose negotiation over violence, whenever possible. Promised to love her as fiercely as he'd once loved power. Harlow promised to see him, not the reputation, not the fear, not the money. Just him. Promised to keep challenging him, keep pushing him toward better choices. Promised to love every complicated part of him. Even the criminal parts? Sherhu murmured. Especially those, Harlow whispered back. They made you who you are. And I love who you are. They honeymooned in Seoul. Visited Madame Gu's gym, met the new students she was torturing into excellence. Ate street food at midnight, explored temples at dawn. Sherhu showed Harlow his childhood neighborhoods, the places that had shaped him before New York changed everything. I could leave this life, he said one night on a rooftop overlooking the city. Go legitimate. My mother would love it. You'd probably prefer it. Would you be happy? Harlow asked. I don't know. Probably not. This is who I am. Then stay who you are. Just keep being the version who chooses peace when possible. The version who calls his mother every week. The version who shows up at art galleries even though you don't understand half the installations. I understand them. I just think some of them are pretentious. Harlow laughed. Fair. They went home to New York, to the life they'd built. Sherhu kept running his territories, but different now, less violence, more negotiation, building empire through strategy instead of fear. Harlow opened her own gallery 3 years later, specializing in contemporary African and Asian artists who needed platforms. Madame Gu visited every summer, stayed for weeks, made their apartment smell like home cooking and incense. She taught their daughter Korean when the baby came, insisted on traditional names alongside the English ones. You did good, she told Sherhu one afternoon, watching him play with his daughter on the floor. Better than I hoped. I had good teachers, he replied, glancing at Harlow across the room. 20 years later, Sherhu walked away from the criminal life entirely. Not because Harlow asked, but because he'd built enough legitimate businesses that he didn't need the rest. His territories went to carefully chosen successors, men he taught to negotiate before fighting. They spent their 60th birthdays in Pearl Garden. Jenny still worked there, managing now her own kids' waiting tables. She brought them extra bulgogi without asking, winked at Harlow. You two are my favorite success story, she said. Because we didn't get killed? Sherhu asked. Because you chose each other every single day, even when it was hard. That's rarer than you think. Harlow reached across the table, took Sherhu's hand. Worth it though. Every complicated, dangerous, impossible moment, he agreed. Madame Gu passed away at 93, peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family. Sherhu cried like the boy he'd been before the world taught him to be hard. Harlow held him through it, reminded him of every lesson his mother had taught, about honor, about strength, about choosing who you wanted to be instead of whose circumstances made you. They scattered her ashes and soul at the gym where she'd taught generations of students, where she'd taught Harlow to defend herself, where she'd dreamed her son would find his way home. She saved me, Sherhu said. Sent you to save me. She saved us both, Harlow corrected. They stood there in the space that held so much history, so much love, so much complicated family. And they chose, like they'd been choosing for decades, to keep building something whole from broken pieces. The flight back to New York felt longer than usual. Sherhu stared out the window while Harlow sketched in her notebook, neither talking much. Grief did that, made words feel useless. 3 days after they landed, a package arrived at their apartment. No return address, just Madame Gu's handwriting on the label. Harlow's hands shook opening it. Inside was a leather journal, pages filled with Korean script, and a letter addressed to both of them. What does it say? Sherhu asked. Harlow read aloud, translating as she went. My dear children, if you're reading this, I've finally gone to rest. Don't be sad too long. I lived a full life and got to see my stubborn son become a good man. But there's something I never told you, something you need to know now. Sherhu leaned closer.
What?
The night Sherhu's father was attacked, the debt he owed, it wasn't random. Someone set him up deliberately. Someone who wanted to force Sherhu into the criminal world. Harlow's voice wavered. She says she spent 20 years investigating. Found proof.
Names.
Everything. The journal contained it all. Bank records, photographs, testimonies from people Madame Gu had tracked down over decades. The conspiracy went deeper than either of them had imagined. A rival crime family had targeted Sherhu's father specifically because they'd seen potential in young Sherhu. Wanted to recruit him, mold him, use him. She never told me, Sherhu whispered. All these years. She was protecting you. Says here she didn't want you seeking revenge. Didn't want you going darker. Harlow flipped through pages. But she also says you deserve to know the truth. To understand it wasn't your father's fault. Wasn't your choice. You were manipulated into this life from the beginning. Sherhu stood abruptly, walked to the window, shoulders rigid. Who did it? Harlow checked the journal. Family called the Zhao Syndicate, based in Chinatown. They've been operating for 40 years. I know them. We have a truce. Have had one for a decade. According to this, their current leader wasn't involved. It was his father, who died 15 years ago. Harlow set down the journal. The son didn't know about any of this. Your truce is legitimate. Sherhu pressed his forehead against the glass. So, what am I supposed to do with this information? The person responsible is dead. The family that hurt mine is now my ally. What's the point? The point is you get to decide what it means, Harlow said quietly. You could break the truce, could go after them for their father's sins.
Or you could let it go.
Really let it go. Understanding it wasn't your fault might give you permission to finally walk away clean. He turned to face her. You think I should tell them? I think you should do whatever brings you peace. Sherhu spent 3 days thinking. Called old contacts. Verified Madame Gu's research. Everything checked out. His father had been an innocent businessman destroyed by calculated cruelty. Sherhu's entire life had been engineered by someone else's ambition. On the fourth day, he requested a meeting with Raymond Zhao. They met at a neutral restaurant, both sides bringing minimal security. Raymond was younger than Sherhu by 5 years, educated, trying to legitimize his family's operations the same way Sherhu had. "I found something," Sherhu said, sliding the journal copies across the table. "About how I ended up in this life. Your father was involved." Raymond read silently, his face going pale. When he finished, he looked genuinely horrified. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you. If you want to end our truce, I'll understand. This is unforgivable." Sherhu took a breath. "I don't want to end the truce. I want to offer you something different. A partnership. We've both been trying to go legitimate. What if we did it together? Pooled resources, created businesses that actually helped our communities instead of exploiting them." Raymond stared. "After what my father did to yours. Your father's sins aren't yours. Mine aren't my daughter's. We can choose differently." Sherhu leaned forward. "My mother spent 20 years researching this. You know what she wrote at the end? That revenge wouldn't heal anything. That building something better was the only real justice." "You're serious?" "Completely." They shook hands. Started planning that same night. Within 6 months, they'd launched a community center in a neighborhood both their families had once controlled through fear. Job training programs, youth mentorship, small business loans. Everything they'd wished had existed when they were young and desperate. Harlow helped design the space, filled it with local art, made sure it felt welcoming instead of institutional. The grand opening drew hundreds, former rivals working side by side, kids who'd never known anything but gang violence learning computer coding and restaurant management. "Your mother would love this," Raymond told Sherhu. "She already does," Sherhu replied, looking up like maybe Madame Gu could see them. But the past wasn't finished with them yet. 2 months after the center opened, a woman showed up at Harlow's gallery. Mid-50s, elegant, nervous. She asked to speak privately. "My name is Susan," she said once they were alone. "I was your husband's father's secretary. Before everything happened." Harlow's stomach dropped. "Okay." "I testified for Madame Gu. Gave her documents proving the Zhao family's involvement. But there's something else I never told her. Something I was too afraid to share." Susan's hands twisted together. "Your husband has a half-brother." The world tilted. "What?" "His father had an affair. Brief, before Sherhu was born. The woman was American, didn't want anything to do with the family. She raised the boy alone. But I kept track over the years. Made sure he was okay." Susan pulled out a photo. "His name is Julian. He's 35. Lives in Boston. Works as a social worker. He has no idea his father was Korean or that he has a brother." Harlow stared at the picture. The resemblance was subtle but there, same eyes, same jawline, same way of holding his shoulders. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Julian just got diagnosed with leukemia. He needs a bone marrow transplant. His mother's too old, no other family. I thought maybe—" Susan trailed off. "Maybe Sherhu would want to know. Would want to help." Harlow brought the information home. Watched Sherhu's face go through shock, disbelief, then determination. "I want to meet him," he said. "Even if he doesn't want a transplant from you? Even then, he's my brother." They flew to Boston the next weekend. Julian had agreed to meet, curiosity outweighing caution. They met at a coffee shop near his apartment. Him thin from treatment, skeptical but present. "So, you're telling me my deadbeat dad was actually some Korean businessman who got destroyed by the Mafia," Julian said. "And you're the son he raised, who became a crime boss. This is insane." "Completely insane," Sherhu agreed. "But true. I have medical records, DNA tests if you want them. And I'm willing to get tested for marrow compatibility. No strings attached. Why would you do that? You don't know me." "Because you're my brother. Because our father deserved better than what happened to him. Because helping you is something I can do that actually matters." Julian studied him for a long moment. "You're really trying to go straight? Leave that life?" Already have. Mostly. Running community programs now. Boring stuff. Boring stuff, Julian repeated, almost smiling. Yeah. Okay. Let's do the test. They were a match. 93% compatibility. The transplant happened 6 weeks later. Sherhu spending 2 days in the hospital while doctors harvested marrow. Julian in surgery receiving it. Recovery was slow. Sherhu visited Boston monthly, getting to know this brother he'd never known existed. Julian was everything Sherhu wasn't: gentle, patient, devoted to helping people through social systems instead of operating outside them. But they shared their father's stubborn streak, their mother's fierce protectiveness. You know what's weird? Julian said one afternoon while they watched bad television in his apartment. I spent my whole life feeling incomplete, like something was missing. Turns out it was family. Yeah, Sherhu said. Turns out, Julian's cancer went into remission. The doctors called it a miracle. Sherhu called it justice. Finally, something good coming from the family that had been torn apart so violently. A year later, Julian moved to New York. Got a job with the city's child services department. Started volunteering at the community center Sherhu and Raymond had built. The three of them, Sherhu, Raymond, Julian, formed an unlikely alliance. Former crime boss, current crime boss trying to reform, and social worker. They complemented each other in strange ways. Harlow watched them work together and thought about Madame Gu's journal, about broken pieces building something whole. This was what she'd meant. Not just Sherhu and Harlow's relationship, but this larger family they were creating from tragedy and secrets and unexpected grace. On what would have been Madame Gu's 95th birthday, they held a memorial at the community center. Hundreds showed up, people Sherhu had negotiated with instead of fighting, artists Harlow had given gallery space, kids who'd found direction through the center's programs. Julian gave a speech about second chances and family you choose. I never met Madame Gu, he said. But everything I've learned about her tells me she believed people could change. Could choose better. My brother chose better. His friend Raymond chose better. And, because they did, dozens of kids in this neighborhood have choices they wouldn't have had otherwise. That's legacy. That's love that outlasts death. After the memorial, Sherhu and Harlow walked home through the city streets. Spring was trying to break through winter, that uncertain time when anything could happen. I keep thinking about that night at Pearl Garden, Sherhu said. When you caught that fly and spoke Korean, everything changed from that one moment. Everything was always going to change, Harlow replied. Your mother made sure of it. She sent her student to check on her son. Probably knew exactly what would happen. You think she planned this? All of it. I think she planted seeds and trusted them to grow. Harlow squeezed his hand. She was smart like that. They walked in comfortable silence. Two people who'd chosen each other through every complication, every danger, every impossible situation. Who'd built a life that made sense to no one except them. Hey, Sherhu said suddenly. Want to go to Pearl Garden? For old time's sake. It's almost midnight. They're open late on Fridays. They went. Jenny was still there, now training her grandson to manage the night shift. She saw them walk in and laughed. Table 4, she asked. Where else? Sherhu replied. They sat in the same booth where it had all started. Ordered the same dishes. When the food came, Harlow raised her water glass. To Madame Gu. For being stubborn and wise, and refusing to give up on people. To my mother, Sherhu echoed. For seeing potential where everyone else saw problems. They ate slowly, savoring not just the food but the moment. This space that held their entire history. Where a crime boss had underestimated a waitress. Where a waitress had surprised herself by caring about someone she should have feared. Where two broken people had found each other through language and honesty and the intervention of a wise woman half a world away. Jenny brought them extra dessert. On the house. For my favorite couple who defied every odd. We got lucky, Harlow said. Luck had nothing to do with it, Jenny replied. You chose each other every single day. That's not luck. That's work. That's love. Walking home later, Harlow leaned into Sherhu's shoulder. You ever regret it? choosing this complicated life with me instead of something simpler. Every day, Sherhu said, then smiled at her expression.
I'm joking.
Never. Not once. You're the best choice I ever made. Even better than going legitimate? That was your influence. Doesn't count separately. They climbed the stairs to their apartment, where photos lined the walls. Madame Gu smiling, Julian laughing, the community center on opening day, their daughter's graduation. A life built from impossible circumstances and unlikely connections. Harlow thought about all the events that had led them here. The violence that had pushed Sherhu into criminal life, the training that had prepared her to meet him, the fly she'd caught to prove a point, the mother who'd orchestrated their meeting from across an ocean. Every piece necessary, every moment building toward this, a family, a legacy, a love that had survived everything thrown at it. We did good, she said quietly. We did, Sherhu agreed. Thanks to my mother, to you too, and to every choice we made to be better. They stood in their home, surrounded by evidence of lives well-lived and mistakes overcome. Tomorrow would bring new challenges probably, but tonight they had this. Closure, peace, the knowledge that broken things really could build something whole if you were patient enough and brave enough to try. And maybe that was the real lesson Madame Gu had been teaching all along. Not that people couldn't change, but that change required community. Required someone who saw you as more than your worst choices. Required love that persisted through complications and danger, and every reason it shouldn't work. She'd given them that gift. And they'd honored it by passing it forward. To Julian, to Raymond, to every kid who walked through the community center doors looking for direction. The story that started with mockery and defiance had become something else entirely. Something about redemption and family, and choosing connection over isolation. About two people from completely different worlds finding common ground in honesty and hope. Thank you so much for writing this love story journey from the beginning till the end. Probably got some thoughts about it, right? Use the comment section. And lastly, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell to receive the alert for the next video. Your support keeps us going.